Every year, thousands of people go missing, but only a handful of cases ever get massive media attention. The reasons are complicated and different for each case, but for the family and friends of those who barely garner a news article, the weight and questions are heartbreaking. One of these stories happened in 2002, when Evelyn Hernandez and her 5-year-old son Alex went missing in San Francisco. Even after their case was deemed a homicide, the only real attention it garnered was when a more famous case was talked about, that of Laci Peterson. While there were similarities in the two cases, what stands out is the glaring differences in the way each was covered. In this bonus episode of California True Crime, we share the details of the case of Evelyn and Alex Hernandez and shed light on a crime still unsolved. Thank you for joining us for this episode of California True Crime. I'm Jessica, and I'll be hosting this episode. With me in the studio is Charles, and from his Waygroomist studio is Sean. Charles, how are you?
I'm good. A little weird, but I'm good.
And Sean, how are you doing?
Good. Getting used to this, figuring it all out.
And I think you have some updates for people?
Yeah, so this is our first recording like this. We're shelter in place, trying to stay safe so we're not together, but we're working on it. We're going to start season 2 soon. It might come out more sporadically than what we tried to do in the past for season 1, but we want to start getting things out there. We've been keeping up with social media on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can always find us there. We've started a new blog on our website at californiatruecrime.com. You can always check out that. We try to keep that up to date as much as possible. And we're trying. We're working on it. So we hope everyone's doing good too.
So before we get started on the details of this case, I want to tell you where I found most of the information. A lot of it came from the San Francisco Chronicle and the Examiner, but also much of it sadly came from articles that were about someone else, Laci Peterson. Even though no direct connection between the two cases has ever been found, but this is a case where the information is generally given as part of someone else's case. One of the articles even called the victim in this case, quote, the other Laci Peterson. That was the title of the article. So we'll be talking more about that as we go, but that's mainly where we got our information. And you can always find more information about where we got that information, as well as pictures and just details about the crime on our website, californiatruecrime.com. So in 2002, Evelyn Hernandez was 24 years old and living in San Francisco, California. She had moved to the United States legally when she was just 14 years old from El Salvador to live with her mother and 2 sisters. She attended McAteer High School at 555 Portola Drive in San Francisco, and this school closed in 2002, and there's now a school there called the Academy at that location. Evelyn lived in the Crocker Amazon neighborhood in San Francisco. This is a neighborhood in the southern part of San Francisco and sort of extends down to Daly City. And Charles, you have more information on that, right?
Yeah, the Crocker, I had never, and I'm not as familiar with the San Francisco area as you and Sean, so this was kind of new to me. And what struck me really was the name Crocker Amazon. So we did a little research, and originally the Crocker Amazon section was part of a larger part of San Francisco called the Excelsior District, which around the 20s or 30s started to be broken up because of developers. And actually in 1928, 1930, the Crocker Estate Group, which was a group that was developing stuff all up and down California, came in and took a section of Excelsior and developed it into what will eventually be called Crocker Amazon. What's interesting was this area of San Francisco was designed as a place for white flight. So as Excelsior and a lot of San Francisco was becoming more and more diverse, a lot of the white residents were moving out of the area, and Crocker Amazon was the place that was set up, I guess, for them, like the white suburbs. It's called Crocker Amazon based on the developer's name, as well as the first building there, which was the Amazon Theater, and ground was broken actually in 1913. But in 1928, the theater was officially opened and called the Amazon. The Amazon Theater continues all the way up until around the late 40s, early 50s. It gets renamed the Apollo. The Apollo Theater in San Francisco continues for another around 20 years. It closes down, reopens up in the 80s, closes down again. And the theater is actually still there. I looked it up. It's part of a Walgreens, which we'll post the link on our website, as well as an interesting article from a resident of Crocker Amazon through the 40s and 50s.
One of the things I found really interesting about this neighborhood is that it's mainly a suburban area with just mainly homes and kind of not much else. And also, in San Francisco, the houses are really close together. In this neighborhood, many of the houses are actually 10 feet away from each other, which...
Yeah, it was in the article I read about the early history of this place. Crocker Amazon really was a place that was more bucolic and suburban, obviously because that's what they were going for, than you might see in other parts of the city. The resident talked about the idea that everybody would be mowing their lawns on Saturdays and kids would be playing in the yard. And if you know San Francisco at all, there's not a whole lot of yards there. So this really was a place that you see that was similar to other places in cities where, as the city becomes more diverse, you do see that white flight moving out, which I also find ironic because from the 1930s until 2020, the area has gotten consistently more diverse. It's actually home to one of the largest Filipino populations in the San Francisco area. It has a huge Latino community because of it's so close to some other enclaves of Latino, like thinking like the Mission in those areas where you have a higher percentage of Latinos. Also, a large African American population. And it's at the same time, it's also one of the wealthier parts of the Excelsior district. It's very, very affluent. I think the median home price is somewhere around like $1 million.
Sean, did you have a lot of, you lived in San Francisco, did you have a lot of interaction in this neighborhood?
Not really. I mean, I lived a little bit south of it, I think. I lived in Daly City, and it's not far from it. And I think it's connected by all the super long streets like Mission and stuff like that, because I lived right off of Mission, which will take you a lot of places. So I don't remember really. I mean, it doesn't stand out like that's where I hung out all the time or anything like that. So
it like Jesse said, it really does sound, and the descriptions, what I looked up from photographs and Google Earth and stuff, it really is one of those areas of San Francisco that's only homes. It's a hub. It has, like a lot of other places in San Francisco, a lot of public transportation and connections there. But it seems like if you want to go grocery shopping or things like that, you go elsewhere.
Which isn't that far, though. I mean, it could be far with traffic if you're like doing public transportation and every bus stop and traffic. But yeah, there hardly are any, like, it's hard to find just a bunch of houses together. There are some areas like up by the park that are, that maybe like Sunset area and stuff like that, but you still have little stores and stuff like that, but it's hard to find.
I think it's interesting too, because I know we've done a few cases in the Bay Area, and it's always interesting to me because having gone there and hung out, on the outside, it seems like such a huge place. Like San Francisco and the Bay Area is so massive, but it's really not. Like you said, it's not very far from that to other places in San Francisco.
It's just tall. I was always scared of it. Tall buildings scare me, so it was hard going downtown.
I can't see the horizon. There's too many people.
It does also have the second largest park. Golden Gate Park is the biggest park in San Francisco. It has a park called McLaren Park in the Crocker Amazon neighborhood. It's very, very big, and a lot of it's overgrown, and it will be a factor in our cold case later. So just kind of remember where this is at. Evelyn Hernandez was living in this area of San Francisco with her 5-year-old son, Alex. Alex's father was in the Navy and lived in Puerto Rico. Many of the news reports say that he wasn't with Evelyn any longer, and he wasn't aware he had a son with her either. He's not ever, in anything I read, considered a suspect, and there doesn't appear to be a lot of contact between the two. In 2002, Evelyn was pregnant with her second child. The father of this child was named Herman Aguilar, a 36-year-old who Evelyn had dated for several months. In the newspaper, Evelyn's friend says she found out 4 months into her pregnancy that her boyfriend Aguilar was married. There isn't much information about their relationship or what happened when she found out, but it seems that they stayed, quote, friends, at least according to Aguilar, and that he was involved with her pregnancy to some degree. Evelyn worked very hard to provide for her family. Over the years, she worked several different jobs. She worked at Costco, she worked as a vocational nurse, and she also worked at the Clift Royal Sonesta Hotel at 495 Geary Street in San Francisco. She also might have worked part-time for a limo company in South San Francisco, the town, not the southern part of San Francisco. But this is only mentioned in one article, so I'm not sure if she definitely worked there or maybe just spent time there. In April of 2002, Evelyn was on disability because of issues with her pregnancy. Evelyn was also known as a caring mother who was devoted to her son. She's described as someone who spent a lot of time in his classroom and volunteering at his school. On Tuesday, April 30th, 2002, Evelyn had an appointment for a prenatal exam at San Francisco General Hospital. Before going to that appointment, Aguilar, the father of her child due in May, went to IKEA and bought her son a new bed. Later, he met Evelyn at the exam at 1001 Potrero Avenue. The official name of this hospital is now Zuckerberg San Francisco General and Trauma Center, and it's sort of near the Mission District and the Potrero Hill neighborhoods. Evelyn Hernandez didn't have a car, so if she had a ride to and from the hospital, it would have taken her about 15 to 20 minutes each way. By public transportation, it would have taken about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic, and also if you lived in the city, if the bus systems were on time. The next day, Wednesday, May 1st, 2002, at 8 a.m., Evelyn talked by phone with her sister in Virginia. During this call, she told her sister she hadn't been feeling well due to the pregnancy. On this day, she was only a week from her due date on May 7th. She told her sister she had been experiencing pain, and her sister asked if Evelyn had someone to take her son to school. She was in so much pain, she was worried about her going back and forth. Evelyn didn't and would take her son to school. This seemed like the kind of mother that she was, very sacrificing. That day, Evelyn took her son to school, and at one point during the day, she used an ATM. Also, at some point during this day, she called Aguilar. I don't have an exact time for that phone call or what they talked about. The last person known to speak with Evelyn was her other sister, who lived in Richmond, California, at 9 p.m. The two talked about a baby shower that was to be held in Richmond. Her sister wanted to know how Evelyn was getting to the party because she didn't have a car. Richmond is northeast of San Francisco and across the bay. During this phone call, she seemed happy and was in good spirits. This was the last time anyone spoke to Evelyn. On Thursday, May 2nd, 2002, Alex, Evelyn's 5-year-old son, did not arrive for school at Buena Vista Elementary School, where he attended preschool. The school is on 23rd and Mission Street in the Mission District in San Francisco. And it's been a long time since I lived in San Francisco, but this is quite a jaunt from their neighborhood, especially knowing she's pregnant and she's been in a lot of pain and sick. Alex Hernandez was 5 years old in 2002. His full name was Alexis Geraldo Hernandez. He was born on November 6, 1996, and we will have pictures of him on our website and our social media. He was last seen on May 1st, 2002, the day before, at school. Despite the fact that no one hears from Evelyn or sees either Evelyn or Alex for several days, she isn't reported missing until May 7th, 2002. That's an important date, not only because she's reported missing, but this is also meant to be her due date. On this day, she's reported missing by both the father of her child, and most of the newspapers describe him as her boyfriend. I don't really know their relationship at this time. I know he's going to doctor's appointments and things like that, but I don't really feel comfortable calling him her boyfriend.
At this point, when he's going to prenatal care visits with her, he's still married. Is he divorced or separated or?
No, he's still married. There's some articles, newer articles, that will say he was unhappy when she found out that she was pregnant, but I don't have a lot of, they never cite a source or say where that came from, and I just don't feel comfortable, attributing that to him. But he is still married, and we don't know much about that situation either.
When you talked about her talking to her sister in Richmond about a baby shower, I don't know if you know, but was the baby shower scheduled for after her date, or was it before?
I don't know. They didn't give the day.
It's just weird because most of the time baby showers are before.
Right, and her due date is coming up very quickly.
Yeah, so maybe they just couldn't plan it right or something, and they did it after.
Could be the fact that since she was on disability and kind of almost total bed rest because of complications in her, being sick and worried about taking care of the baby, maybe it was planned for later to make sure that she wasn't under any undue stress.
Right.
So on May 7th, she's also reported missing by her sister. So we were looking at the large gap between when she's last seen and when someone reports her missing. But Sean, you had a good idea based on the days of the week.
Yeah, well, I when I was thinking about it, I thought it was weird that like the preschool didn't bring it up, maybe because she goes missing on a Thursday. And then it's not the May 7th would be the following Tuesday. So I just thought it was odd that, a school wouldn't call if a kid didn't show up. And we talked about, we had to go over this point, but we talked about it a lot and we came up with a lot of different things. One being that mom, since she was on bed rest, could have been already told him, hey, if my kid doesn't show up, it means I'm going into labor. That kind of thing. I think, Charles, you brought up just that it's Thursday into the weekend.
Yeah, I know that maybe a school would call, then they'll call and say, hey, your child's not, but I don't think it would register real well until, like you said, it's Friday. So you figure that they'll get one call and then Monday starts the whole week again. So another call. It would be a couple of days, I think, really before school would start to worry, oh, Alex isn't here and Evelyn's always bringing him to school. What's going on? And that 2 extra days in the weekend is really the problem I see.
Yeah. And I especially with the circumstances, they probably, so it was just when I first was seeing it, I'm like, how does this school not say anything? But then going over the dates and the situation, it makes sense.
And you're exactly right. That idea that she's so active at her school, so it's chances are the front office and her and Alex's teacher knows Evelyn's pregnant and it's getting close to her due date. It's totally possible that everybody goes, oh, she must have went into labor, so we'll see Alex in a week or so.
Right.
I think the other thing too is that she's on disability, so that also cuts down on the amount of people you're seeing every day at work or who are expected to know that you're there and not wonder what's happened to you.
And this is a woman who is like an incredible mom in the respect that she is sacrificing everything. She's working a few jobs. She's volunteering. Not only is she working 2 jobs, at least 2 jobs, possibly 3, she's also volunteering in Alex's class on top of that and walking him to school every day. So that's a huge, and then to go from that to disability, it's understandable that people would get into that habit of not seeing her every day.
On that Tuesday, May 7th, Herman Aguilar called police to tell them that he had been unable to get in touch or find Evelyn. He tells police that he's gone to her apartment and no one else is there or answered, and that he's tried to reach her by her cell phone and no answer there either. He also called local hospitals, I assume thinking that, if something had happened to her, she'd be there, but probably more likely that maybe she had gone into labor and had the baby, but she was nowhere to be found. Herman Aguilar is 36 years old in 2002 and is married. He works as a mechanic for United Airlines at the San Francisco airport and as a mechanic at a limo company in South San Francisco. Again, this is the South San Francisco, that's the town, not South in San Francisco. And I don't really know too much about South San Francisco. I lived in Daly City for a while. I know it for the airport and some hotels, conferences. Sean, I think you know a little more?
Yeah, I used to live here, so I got some information on it for you. So South San Francisco is a city in San Mateo County, California. Like you've been saying, it's not actually part of San Francisco. It's south of it, but it's part of the Bay Area and everything like that. The population was about 63,000 in the 2010 census. South San Francisco is mainly known to locals as South City. You just call it that. It was incorporated in 1908. Like I said, I used to live there. I lived in the Peninsula Pines area. It was cool. We lived very close to the San Francisco airport, which is in South City. But the weird thing is, if you were to buy something from the airport or get a receipt, it will actually say San Francisco instead of South San Francisco.
Huh.
Yeah, even though it's in it. But yeah, it's a cool little city. You had everything you need. But if you still wanted to do fun stuff like go see a band or sporting events or stuff like that, you would still need to go into the city. See's Candy's headquarters is there. Across the street from See's Candy's headquarters is the one and only bowling alley in town, which is awesome. Genentech opened there in 1976, which coined the term for South City, the birthplace of biotechnology. There's also, if you come in through the San Mateo Bridge area, mainly like the south side, you'll see a huge sign that says South San Francisco, the industrial city. It's on a hilltop. It's a big sign. It's been there since 1923, and it's been refurbished here and there. In true crime history, South City has a legacy, if you will. Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, I think everyone knows who that is. They were at the South City Lumber and Supply Company, a place where I used to go and get my tools because I'd fix things in my house, I guess. And that's where Charles Ng stole a $75 vice. They were caught by employees, and Lake, trying to not have police involved, said he'd pay for it, but the police still came when they were questioning Lake because Charles Ng ran off. When they were questioning Lake, they found a gun with a silencer in his trunk, and this is when he gets caught and is taken to the police station, and that's where he drinks the poison pill that kills him. I mean, it's a big story, and this happened in 1985. And the lumberyard area is only about 2 blocks away from this limo company in South City that we talked about.
Oh, where Aguilar worked?
Yeah.
When police go to Evelyn's apartment, they don't find her wallet, but they do find passports for her and her son still there. The newspaper doesn't go into details of what they find in the apartment or what state it's in, but initially police believe that she may have left town to have her baby, so it's safe to assume they didn't see anything that would lead them to believe she had something violent happen to her. According to a Univision article on this case, Evelyn also has the majority of her family living in El Salvador, so perhaps in the minds of police, she may have gone to have the baby there. Her passports were in the apartment, so that seems a little bit unlikely. But they don't think that anything has happened to her or that she may even be missing. Her family and friends, however, find this theory suspicious. This was a woman preparing to have her baby in San Francisco. She's been in touch with her sisters. She's been going to appointments. Just leaving town without a word was not a characteristic of her. Because police think she may have left town on her own accord, they don't issue information to other police or the public to be on the lookout for her or her son. And this is really important because as little information as there is on Evelyn, there's even less information on her 5-year-old son, who is also gone missing at this time. I don't know what you guys think of that.
It does seem weird that you have 2 people missing, but at the same time, if they just think that they left town, then it's not, there's no signs of anything else. So it could just be like they thought that she left town.
But it is weird that her family in El Salvador says she wouldn't have come here, and she would have had to have taken her passports, and her other family is in the Bay Area and they haven't heard her. I just find it kind of almost dismissive by the police of, oh, she probably just took off. And this is a woman who's on disability, who's not supposed to be really doing a lot because of her pregnancy, and somebody who has a track record of helping out in her son's classroom. It's very odd to me.
I think knowing, because we know what happens to her, or not what happens to her, but knowing the outcome of her being missing, it's super frustrating that they lose this time to be on the lookout for her and her son especially. But then I have to go back to the statistics of how often people go missing and that they really do come back. So it's hard for police, like Sean said. There's no other evidence that something has gone wrong. Maybe she did just leave.
And could it be that it was 5 days? Like they would think, oh, if she went missing right away, I'm like so much time has passed that they just think, oh, she just took off.
Yeah, it's
instead
possible.
of it being like right away that they had plans right away with someone and they didn't show up or something like that. But since it was like 5 days past.
Well, and two, to play devil's advocate, we don't, when we hear stories like this, most oftentimes we know what the outcome is going to be, but what's never really reported is how many other phone calls are coming into that particular police department during that 5-day period. What else? What other kinds of crimes are going on? What's the police force like? So maybe you're right. Maybe they're looking at it going, well, there's no sign of foul play. There's nobody who actually has an axe to grind against her. Let's look for the most obvious possibility is her not being her here is she left.
And they do go to her home. It's not like they don't do anything. It's just frustrating knowing what we know. And also frustrating knowing that other cases have been treated differently, which we'll talk about as we go through this episode. A few days after Evelyn and Alex are reported missing, a person in South San Francisco finds her wallet in a ditch in a parking lot. This area the place where they find the wallet sounds undeveloped in 2002, and the wallet is found next to Colma Creek on Canal Street and Linden Avenue. Colma Creek runs through South San Francisco, north through the San Bruno Mountains, near the Crocker Amazon neighborhood, and eventually out to the Bay of San Francisco. It's a creek that has varying levels of water depending on the year, and has areas where it doesn't run straight through. We'll have pictures on our site for you to look at, and you can find it on Google Maps. In that picture, it basically looks empty. When the wallet is found, the person looks inside and finds Evelyn Hernandez's contact information. There isn't any information in the news about Evelyn Hernandez, so there isn't any reason to think that this person is missing or they found evidence in a crime. So the person makes it their goal to try and get it back to Evelyn. They try for several weeks, but never hear back from her. And on May 30th, 2002, they finally bring the wallet to the police station.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
From May 7th to this. Well, May 7th was just the due date. It's even further back of when Alex didn't show up to school. So
yeah,
it's like a full month.
I'm not sure. It doesn't have a date for when the wallet is found, but it sounds like it's pretty quickly after she goes missing. So pretty good chunk of time.
But just to turn it into the police station on May 30th, the lady most likely didn't contact the police station before because she was just trying to find it. So it's like you have May 7th, the police are contacted of her missing, but this woman doesn't know because she doesn't know anything about it because it's not fully covered. And then it's not until the 30th the police find out that her wallet was next to a canal. So it's just missteps or...
It's another unfortunate thing that happened during this because the woman or the person who found the wallet probably didn't want to bother the police or just say, oh, somebody just lost our wallet. I'll try again, not thinking that there's foul play.
Right. And they probably at the time, not probably, they didn't have at the time those really interesting Facebook groups that usually say, hey, I found this wallet. Does anyone know this person?
Oh, yeah. Like the
thing.
Community Facebook groups where I lost a dog. We've all posted on those or...
I have not posted on those, Charles.
Oh, really? I actually have. I posted once. We found a dog in our front yard, a beautiful dog, and posted and tried to find their owner. We never actually found the owner. The police came and actually took care of the dog. Not badly, just a really nice police officer came and they were able to track down the owner.
Right. So, that actually worked. It was like the police watched that anyway. So that would have been, if stuff like that was around then, but it wasn't.
And you have to wonder if it would have changed things because after this wallet's found and brought to police, it's a big piece of new evidence for them. Inside the wallet, the police find Evelyn's identification, folded up cash, and her disability check uncashed.
I'm thinking that's like another sign too. But it's way later, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just thinking, like, you have a disability check uncashed. This should be right away. Oh, well, but at the same time, if she would have lost her wallet. So never mind. It's just hard.
Well, no.
It's hard to think.
You're absolutely right. I think it had that piece of evidence been delivered to the police earlier, and again, nothing against the person that did that. She was trying to do, or he was trying to do the right thing. But had that shown up on the 7th of May instead of the 30th, who knows what the police would have found.
Right.
The police go to the area with dogs to search. They don't find anything else. They also quickly notice something that took, actually, Sean just a quick Google search to determine, and that's that this area is about 2 blocks, maybe not even, from the limo servants where Aguilar worked as a mechanic and near a gas station he was known to use. This entire area where the wallet is found is an industrial park, lots of garages, a gas station, places you see that where people don't necessarily live, but it's sort of on the edges of town. Storage buildings, things like that.
Like industrial parks.
Yeah. With this new information, about a month after Evelyn and Alex go missing, her case is moved from missing persons to homicide, and a press conference is held. There's still little coverage in the newspapers. The first article I can find on this topic in the San Francisco Examiner is on June 12th, 2002. That's a full month and 12 days after she and her son had gone missing. Flyers are also distributed by her family and friends. While Aguilar, who had reported her missing, had been talking with missing persons and open to interviews with them, once the case is transferred, he stops voluntarily helping them. He also gets a lawyer, and all communication goes through them.
The mall. A staple in the American pastime since the mid-20th century. Though some still thrive today in all their retail glory, others have fallen to the rise of our technology. So grab a hot pretzel and find a hard bench on which to relax, underneath a beautiful enclosed facade. And join me as we discuss the history of malls.
On July 24th, 2002, a person walking on the Embarcadero, an area near the Bay Bridge and on the edge of the San Francisco Bay, sees something in the water. The Embarcadero is an area that is in the northeast part of San Francisco. It runs from about Pier 39 to Oracle Park where the Giants play. It's an important stop on the BART for a lot of commuters as it connects to the financial district and downtown San Francisco where a lot of people work. As the person was walking along the waterfront near Folsom Street, this was an area that isn't actually a beach area. There's a park there called Rincon Park, and when you walk along the water, you're walking along a raised concrete seawall. When they looked into the bay, they saw a body floating in the water about 16 feet away. When police take the body from the water, they find it isn't a full body, but is the lower half of a torso and legs, and nearby or attached in some way are maternity clothes. They do not find a baby or any other body parts. Police think right away that the body might be Evelyn, but they need to compare DNA before they can say for sure. They take DNA from her toothbrush and check if it matches. It takes a couple weeks, but after Labor Day in 2002, the police can confirm that the body in the bay is Evelyn Hernandez. The baby she was carrying and her son Alex are nowhere to be found. After she's identified, Aguilar does not voluntarily speak with police or the press, but through his lawyer says, quote, that he was deeply saddened by the news of the death of his close friend. A memorial is held for Evelyn, and about 100 people attend. The police believe that Alex and the baby are also deceased. After she's found, coverage of this case ends, in part because more information isn't found or released to the press. And it's interesting because even though she's been found, her son is still missing, and there's this part of you that thinks if a child is missing, it must be getting a lot of attention. And I know the police are assuming he's been murdered as well, but just doesn't get any attention.
No, and I guess we're used to, especially around this time, and I know you're going to talk about that, but cases where a mother goes missing or children go missing usually are in the news a lot longer. So then seeing that the fact that this case is not really covered to the extent that maybe some others are is kind of disheartening. And it begs the question, why? You know, I would think now we've talked about this a lot in other cases and other episodes, that maybe the police had more information that they're working on and aren't willing to release. But you'd hope that the press would keep some of this in the forefront of people's minds so they can call in tip lines or whatever.
I think before we started doing this podcast, I would have been really surprised that a child's disappearance is getting a lot of attention. But now that we do it and we pay a lot of attention to news stories, a lot of kids go missing that never really get attention. And I think a lot more people go missing than the handful of stories every year that get tons of media attention. So I don't know if it's surprising, it's frustrating, and I don't know that it would have mattered, but
for me, I think that's the hard thing with being I won't use the term fan of true crime, but being somebody who watches and reads a lot of true crime and takes part in a true crime podcast, is that feeling like the case that you're looking at or you're researching or you're watching on Dateline or 48 Hours or any of these other shows, that every missing person case has that much attention. And like you said, it really doesn't.
So looking at this, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but thinking of like missing, like the big cases, Lacey Peterson, Polly Klaas, stuff like that. This person's last name is Hernandez. Do you think it has anything to do that it's a minority?
I think it's definitely possible. I don't know how much access, she spoke English but not very well. I don't know how much access her friends and family had to the press. I don't know why one case gets, Lacey Peterson is something we're going to talk a lot about in a little bit, but so much more attention compared to this. But it's hard not to notice that seems a big difference between the two. That and economic status.
And I think that also has something to do with it. I kind of agree with Sean and you that I do think race plays something into it. Where there's a lot of cases that we've seen where, dependent on the person's ethnicity or socioeconomic background, going further back, when we did the research for Dorothea Puente, I still believe, and I know a lot of people do, the fact that she was able to get away with it for so long was because she was dealing with almost an invisible population of older, not economically secure group of people. So now you have a minority woman who has one child and one on the way who's working multiple jobs. To me, that's weird because I think more people in the area would identify with her rather than some of the other more high-profile cases that might have more money behind them.
Right, but I think it did show up in Univision, right? Didn't you mention that earlier, Jessica?
Yeah, I use newspapers, so I didn't really go back through news reports. I found one article in Univision a few years later that kind of summed up.
Oh, okay. A few years later. But yeah.
But they might have covered it.
Right. Yeah, I think it matters on everything we talked about, and it's weird. It's really, I'd like to see statistics of which cases became so popular and looking at their economic status and ethnicity. I think that would be an interesting study.
I agree with you. I think there's also some other things to put into that mix too, is what else is going, because we've seen this in a few other cases where, depending on what happens in the news other than this case, can overshadow. I'm thinking of like the Land Park case where you had, a police strike and the Gulf War start at the same time that this family was brutally murdered, and it got overshadowed, unfortunately. Also, and this is a terrible thing to say, but the amount of violence that goes on in the area at that time, what were the crime? I would be interested to see the crime statistics for that area and see how that factors in as well. No, I think it's easy sometimes to look at one thing and say this is the reason why, but like you said, Sean, it's a weird thing. I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a collection of multiple reasons why this particular case didn't get the attention it deserved.
I didn't write it in here because it doesn't really have much to do with what we were talking about, but it is also interesting, since you bring it up, the different reasons why one person might not be covered and why someone else would be. The people who are often covered aren't even the most likely to go missing. Men by far go missing more often than women. And it's, if we think back on most cases, it's really women who are covered, which might be a negative thing as well. Like, we're somehow enthralled by this idea of women being harmed or in trouble, and that has hurt men who go missing in their cases.
Well, yeah, we've talked a lot, I think, over the first season and now moving into the second season. I know in our meetings and when we get together, and now when we're getting together by phone and video conferencing, one of the things that we always come back to is this idea that the news coverage, the changing scape of news coverage, we talked about last year when we talked about Stephen Stainer case, and how Stephen Stainer's case was right before the 24-hour news cycle, and how, and this is a terrible thing to say, so I apologize, but the entertainment factor of the story having a lot to do with how it's covered. And I don't mean that it's entertaining. I mean, is it going to have broad appeal? Are people going to tune in night after night for an update on this case? Can people identify with them? You know, we've seen that before with the Son Carrington families and their foundation of trying to get people to continue to talk about cases. And unfortunately, Evelyn and Alex's family weren't in that position to do that.
So after that, we kind of went off how we do sometimes. But I think we originally said we were still kind of shocked that the boy wasn't still in the news, right? That's where we got it from.
Yeah,
that.
because I mean, we know for sure his mother's been murdered. And I know the police believe that he's also been murdered, but lots of other people don't.
But I think going off of that too, could there have been, I mean, she's at the bay. Could she have jumped off the bridge with her kid? Let's say she's on disability. Maybe it's like there's a lot of stuff going on. All situations, since we don't know, but she was in the bay.
I think the wallet is a weird factor for that, but
right, yes.
Based on at least what's been released to the press, there doesn't seem to be a lot of information that may have help the police point in one direction or the other, which is really why they need people to hear about this case. And someone might know something and not even realize it. Come forward and tell us what you know.
And again, like you said, Sean, there's still this huge gaping hole in the story of like what happened to Alex.
Yes.
And the unborn child.
There's a lot of questions, that's for sure. Everything I read did have detectives who were trying to find answers and continued looking to the case, so it's hard to tell whether in this case news coverage is a barometer for how much work is actually going into the case. The detective on the case also seemed upset at the low interest, so it may be that all the work that's being done is still being done, we're just not seeing it. On the other hand, news interest in cases does seem to be very important when it comes to how police or labs or really cities spend their money and resources, and especially in cases where what police need are people, as we said, to come forward and give information. Keeping that pressure in the media is really important. We've seen that in a lot of cases we've talked about or other podcasts have covered. On the other hand, we've definitely seen cases where that much pressure, with the entire national media focused, has been applied to the wrong people and disastrous outcomes have happened.
Mm-hmm.
On May 2nd, 2003, a year since Evelyn and Alex had gone missing, their family and friends held a memorial for them on the Embarcadero, near where she was found. It was an overcast day with light rain. The San Francisco Chronicle describes a ceremony that used the smoke from burning resin to cover the flowers, purifying them, before the 20 people present threw them into the bay. The goal of this ceremony was to remember their friends and loved one and to keep the case in the minds of the public. Despite the police's belief that Alex, whose body had not been found, was also murdered with his mother, the family continued to believe that he might be alive and they wouldn't give up hope of finding him. At the memorial, friend Maria Rinaldi said it was, quote, to remember her, to honor her life, to tell her how much we love her and how hard we are trying to find Alex. We won't stop until we find out what happened to her. In sign language, Evelyn's sister, Reina Solis, tells the newspaper that, quote, I want the police to keep on investigating and to find out who did this.
I think that's an important thing too, going back to our earlier conversation, to remember is just because we're not reading this story in these newspapers, that these families are still holding out hope, and it's entirely possible that this police department is still doing what they can. And just because we're not seeing it in newspapers or seeing it on the news, that they're not doing anything
At each of these events that are this memorial and the memorial for and in newspapers, there was always a detective there talking about keeping it going and still, needing people to come forward. So I do think there's people working on the case. It's just frustrating, probably even for the police, especially for the police, that they haven't had the tip or the thing that can help them find the truth.
Especially when you hear so many of these cases where it is one person's small piece of evidence that they see or something that they remember that can actually affect a better outcome than not knowing.
This same year, Mayor Willie Brown offered a reward of $10,000 in this case for information, leading to the arrest of whoever murdered Evelyn Hernandez. Police also asked the public for any information from anyone who had contact or saw Evelyn Hernandez between 9 p.m. on May 1st to 6 a.m. on May 2nd. After this, things were very quiet and even cold in Evelyn's case. The only real attention paid to her case by the media happens because of an unrelated murder on December 24th, 2002. Just 7 months from when Evelyn went missing, another woman, also pregnant, goes missing in Modesto, California, named Laci Peterson. From the beginning, this is a massive case that is covered around the world, and when Laci's body is found washed up from the San Francisco Bay on April 13th, 2003, the news picks up on Evelyn's case, as they were both kind of found in similar circumstances, albeit Laci was found on the other side of the bay and north of Berkeley. This discovery meant that in articles about Laci Peterson, Evelyn Hernandez, or often just, quote, another pregnant woman, would be mentioned. As I said, these articles are often focused on Laci. One even has the title, quote, The Other Laci Peterson. In 2004, the trial of Scott Peterson began, and part of his defense was that possibly another killer had killed his wife, as that killer had done to Evelyn Hernandez. During the trial, there was testimony about Evelyn Hernandez's body presented as possible evidence another killer was involved. The goal being to highlight Evelyn and Laci's similarities. The main similarities are that both women were pregnant and found in the San Francisco Bay. During the trial, experts testified that Evelyn's body, the only part of it was found, was not believed to be disarticulated or cut into pieces or parts by another person and then put in the bay. There were no cut marks on the body or other evidence of sharp or blunt force. Rather, the reason only part of the body was found was due to decomposition and the bay itself, including animals. There is not an official cause of death. Aside from these details, very little information is known about what happened to Evelyn, Alex, and her baby. On April 29, 2019, SFPD announced a $100,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest in the case of Evelyn and Alex Hernandez. In 2003, the detective on the case, Holly Pera, said, quote, At this point, it's going to take people to come forward and remember something. This is a difficult reminder of how many cases still need to be solved, but may only be solved by information from witnesses. Unlike the woman Evelyn is most often compared to and with, Laci Peterson, her case had many disadvantages. Looking at the two cases, it's easy to see the wide gulf of the high amount of media attention in one and the handful of articles in the other. In an article titled The Tale of Two Killings in Alta, California, it says that the San Francisco Chronicle published 32 stories about Laci Peterson after she disappeared, and only 4 on Hernandez, and none of them on the front page. Hernandez's friends also said that they tried for months to get America's Most Wanted to cover the case, but they told them they couldn't because the police didn't have a suspect. That program covered the Peterson case before the police had a suspect. And eventually, America's Most Wanted does, in the ensuing years, cover this case, and I'm still trying to find out what episode that is. But at first, when they're asking and when it's probably most necessary.
If we can find it, we'll post that on our website, californiatruecrime.com.
Why this happened is often talked about, and one of the more easily pinned down reasons is race, or in this case, ethnicity, as we discussed before. Evelyn was from El Salvador, and perhaps not the kind of victim the media was attracted to. But it's important to note that the reason some cases garner attention while others don't is complicated, even in this case. And those complications are something we can change. Evelyn was an immigrant, a single mother, someone who was pregnant, but the paper pointed out many times was pregnant with a married man's baby. She was not rich, She worked service jobs to provide for her family. There was not a lot of evidence when she and her son initially go missing. And then, unlike other cases, evidence and information did not continue in a steady flow. Her community was one that didn't speak English, and her only living relative living near her, her sister, may have been locked out of the system because she is deaf. Unlike other cases in California, one of the biggest differences is that her case was not picked up and championed by an organization like the Son Carrington Foundation in Modesto. That organization was very good at handling media and bringing attention to cases, and is something most people, especially adults, who go missing or are murdered don't have access to. In this case, we have to also think of Alex, who's gone missing and has even less attention paid to his case. Do you guys have any final thoughts on this case?
Not really. I mean, we covered a lot of what we were thinking, and it's hard because it's really, really difficult. And I think we've talked about this many times, or we've thought about it or talked about it on the side, that why are some covered and why are some not? What makes others more important than other people? And it's just hard because you never know. You don't know. Like you talked about, the police might have had more stuff and we don't know about it. Maybe there's just stuff that can't be put out there, or they didn't have enough information. I don't know. Some breathe fire and some just like are smoke that you can't really, I don't know. It frustrates me because there's probably tons of these cases and you just don't know about them.
I'm with you. And what also frustrates me is the ease of which somebody can just disappear off the face of the planet and then show up later dead. I think that's what shocked me. This is a pregnant woman who is kind of a fixture in her community. She worked a few jobs. She was active at her kid's school, and then suddenly, like you said, just like smoke, she's gone. And there's no evidence other than a wallet found. Well, there's no publicly released evidence. It's a shame.
There are probably many reasons this case didn't get much attention, and we all play a part in that. Truth is, only a handful of cases each year get the kind of attention the Peterson case did. Far more cases barely get a blip of that, and in the few we've looked at, police continue to say they need information. These are cases that might never be solved by science, but by time, by someone's conscience, or by someone realizing they had important information and didn't know it. The chance this will happen is lessened when no one speaks for the victims. Evelyn Hernandez was a loving mother to her son, Alex. The two were planning a life with her baby-to-be. The three of them deserve answers, as do the people who love them and miss having them in their lives. Family are still looking for Alex. He was born on November 6, 1996, and was 5 years old when he went missing. In 2002, he had brown hair and brown eyes and was 4 feet tall and 45 pounds. He would be 23 years old today. The baby Evelyn was carrying would be almost 18 years old. She had intended to name him Fernando. Police are looking for any information into the case of Evelyn and Alex Hernandez. If you have any information, please contact the San Francisco Cold Case Unit at 415-553-1450. If you wish to stay anonymous, you can call the anonymous tip line at 415-575-4444 or text a tip to tip 411. In your text, please write SFPD followed by your message.
Tonight's cold case is hopefully not a case that has gone cold, but an ongoing case that is similar to the one we just talked about, and one that needs attention. On April 1st, 2016, 32-year-old Nicole Fitz went missing from San Francisco, California. At the time, Nicole was living in the Mission and working at Best Buy on Harrison Street. On the day she went missing, she worked her shift, then went to a mall with a friend, stopped at a 7-Eleven to take cash out of an ATM, and picked up a pizza at Pizza Hut. After going home, she settled in for a movie when she received a call around 9 p.m. She told her roommate that this call was from the babysitter who wanted to meet. Nicole was in the process of getting her daughter, a 2-year-old Ariana Fitz, back from a babysitter who had watched her while she was working long hours. This was about to change, and Nicole had told the sitter that she wouldn't need to watch Ariana after April 2nd. Nicole left her home to meet this person at BJ's restaurant. dressed in her blue Best Buy shirt, boarded a Muni bus, and never returned. At 1:13 a.m., a Facebook post coming from Nicole Fitz's account was posted. It read, "Spending time with my 3-year-old. Need this break." The word break was spelled incorrectly. Nicole's family have doubts about Nicole's writing this post because her daughter was 2-year-old at the time and because the word break was misspelled. Nicole was fastidious about spelling and grammar. Nicole's roommate also received a strange text message from her during the night she went missing. This message said that she was going to Fresno with a friend named Sean. Neither her roommate or her family knew of a friend Nicole had named Sean, nor did she have a car. Nicole was a hard worker who often took extra shifts at Best Buy. On April 2nd and 3rd, she didn't show up to work. Nicole's family came to San Francisco and reported her missing to police. While investigating, police also realized that Nicole's daughter, Ariana Fitz, had not been seen by anyone in the family since February 2016. Ariana had been staying with a babysitter while Nicole worked and found a place for them both to live. Nicole had been trying for 6 weeks to get her daughter back from the people who she had trusted to watch her child. For weeks, they wouldn't let Nicole see her daughter, and she was desperate to get her back. The names of these people, according to the San Francisco Weekly and the Charlie Project, are Ciolo Hernan, Helena Martin, and Devin Martin. On the day Nicole went missing, she had planned to move her daughter in with her in the mission. In light of this, police realized that both Nicole and Ariana were missing. Then, on April 8, 2016, Nicole's body was found murdered in McLaren Park in San Francisco. Her body had been put in a hole and covered with a piece of plywood that police think the murderer brought with them. This plywood had a unique painting on it. Ariana Fitz was not found with her and is considered still missing. The San Francisco Police Department are offering a $100,000 reward for information about Nicole Fitz's murder and for information about her missing daughter, Ariana. There is also a $10,000 reward put forth by Best Buy. When she went missing, Ariana Fitz was 2 years old. According to the Charlie Project, she is African American, was born on September 6, 2013, was 2 feet tall and 45 pounds. She had black hair and brown eyes. She would now be 6 years old and 7 in September of this year, 2020. We will put pictures of her on our social media and website, including an age progression photo of what she might look like now. Her family is desperately hoping to find Ariana and find answers in Nicole's death. We will have more information on this crime up on our site, including a picture of the plywood that was covering Nicole's body. Police hope someone will recognize the painting on the front of it. If you have any information on Ariana or Nicole Fitz, please contact the San Francisco Police Department at 415-553-0123 or the FBI at 415-553-7400.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this bonus episode of California True Crime. If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can find us at Cali True Crime on Twitter or Instagram, or find us on our Facebook. If you have something you'd like to talk to us about, you can email us at calitruecrime@gmail.com. We'd like to thank our quality control human being named Melanie Duncan. This has been recorded at Snail Ranch Studios and Chateau Walnut Studios, and it is a production of Way Grimace.